Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about my sump and address some questions that I had about it, specifically regarding the Refugium. This is the sump here, and I think mine might be laid out a little bit different than most of the sumps out there. If you have a keen eye, you might notice that I basically have two Refugiums running here, which is a little unusual, I think. And there's a reason for that, which I'm going to get into. But over here is basically the main sump, and this is set up how pretty much all of the other sumps I've seen are. You've got your return or the overflow chamber where the water's coming in with your skimmer, a refugium, and then you got your return section over there. And that's pretty much how my system was going to run when I was initially designing everything. But during the process of setting everything up, I made a change. And, the reason being was this area over here was really going to be my auto top-off reservoir. I had purchased this 10-gallon aquarium, which was going to be the auto top-off reservoir, and it was going to sit over here. And that's pretty much how I think most people run a system. You have a sump, an auto top-off, and all the other equipment down there. But as I was setting mine up, I realized I could put my auto top-off system in the basement right underneath of this tank and pump the water upstairs. So I tested that out, and it worked. And I was like, wow, okay, that's great. It saves me from having to carry buckets of water upstairs to refill this auto top-off reservoir. But after I did that, that left all this extra space over here and left me with an extra 10-gallon aquarium. So I thought about it and decided, why not plumb in a second refugium, which is what I have over here. So a few of you had asked me if I could explain how that's plumbed in there and how it works, and that's what I'll talk about today. Now, most of you guys watching this video probably already know what a refugium is and why you would want one. But for the benefit of anyone who stumbles across this video and is still learning about things, just spend a minute explaining on what they are and how they benefit your system. So as the name might suggest, refugium is basically a place of refuge or a safe place, basically away from the main aquarium. And there's no real rule of how to set your refugium up or what should be in there. But most people tend to use them as a place to grow macroalgae. And the reason being is that if you're growing algae and giving the algae everything it needs to grow down here in this refugium, it will outcompete any nuisance algae that would be growing up in your main display. You generally don't want algae growing in your display because it could grow onto corals, it looks ugly, could kill things up there. But if you put a type of algae down in your refugium and give it some nice lighting and, it has all the nutrients in the tank, it'll help with the filtration. It'll suck up those nutrients, it'll grow down here, and you can easily harvest it and, get it out of your system. So that's the first benefit is, basically nutrient export to help control any nuisance algae that might pop up in your display tank. This will outcompete it. A second benefit is microfauna. So you've got this nice area down here with all of these plants growing. This is the perfect location for things like copepods or amphipods or isopods, all sorts of little tiny crustaceans that live in our aquariums. And this gives them a place to live and to multiply. And then what eventually happens is they'll make their way through the plumbing, just get washed away up into the main display. And they're a great source of food for many fish and even corals. So you're basically having a place to grow natural food supply to help feed the tank. So that's another big benefit of your refugium. Other people, maybe don't stock it with so much macroalgae, and maybe if you had a sick fish or a fish that you needed to get out of the display, you can put it in your refugium and it'll give it a place to recover, where it won't be getting bothered by the rest of the inhabitants. So there's all sorts of possibilities, with the refugium. All right, with that being said, let's take a closer look at what I have growing in my refugiums. So in this first refugium, this is mainly chaetomorpha macroalgae, and it's also got some of that green grape, I don't know what it's called, calurpula. So I got the chaeto and this other type of algae growing in there, and it's kind of all just grown together. So there's two different types of algae mainly growing in this middle one right here. And over on this side, it's mainly, I think this is called calurpula prolifera, and I know I butchered the names. For some reason, I have a hard time saying that. Don't really know how to pronounce it, but I think you know what I mean. And there's also some of this other stuff. I believe it's called like Mexican feather algae. I threw some of that in there as well. And one thing that I have found out is that when you mix different types of algae in the same refugium, one will definitely, or always seems to outcompete the other one. You're always going to have one, it seems, that just will outgrow the other one and kind of take it over. So I kind of have the theory, and I don't know if this really holds true, that if you have multiple types of algae in your system, maybe they're pulling different sorts of things out, or maybe at different rates, I don't know. But I'm a big proponent of, say, biodiversity in the reef tank. So I tried to go with a few different types of algae in here, and just have each one kind of contribute in a slightly different way. But like I said, they tend to, if they mix them together, one will tend to outcompete the other one. It always seems. So in here, I've got the chaeto and the grape algae, and the grape, I think, is sort of outcompeting the chaeto, and it's just a big mess in there. It's kind of all tangled together. And this side's, probably mostly just the leafy type in there. So that's what I got in mine. And these both refugiums are pretty full right now. I need to harvest some of that out. But all right, let me focus in. What the main point of this video is how this system is plumbed in. And it's quite simple, really. So this is a standard 10-gallon aquarium. And let me show you how I have this plumbed in here. So basically, I have a pump. You see this white line coming down there? There's a MaxJet 1200 pump down there. So this is not plumbed into my return line or anything like that. It's got its own pump down there. And that pump is sending water up this line. And it's actually split into two places. So from that pump, it can either go through my media reactors, which are turned off right now. There's nothing in there, so that's shut off. So right now, all of the water is going up, and there's a clear tube behind this white one that goes up and across, and then down here into the aquarium. So I'm just pumping water from that side just over into here, and there's a little outlet up top there, so the water's coming in right on the surface there into this aquarium. So obviously the water needs somewhere to go, so it needs to get back into the main sump. So I'm basically using gravity to drop it back down into there. So this external refugium is up higher than the water line in the sump, so the water will flow back down into there. And I made a little overflow box there. And you can see it's nothing special, no teeth or anything. And I actually made that out of glass. I had a few of these slats of glass, which I got from somebody who used to actually be basement windows. So I had a whole bunch of those and just got a glass cutter. And after a few attempts, learned how to cut glass and just kind of made a little overflow box here. So the water gets pumped into here, overflows back into here. I got a hole drilled in the side of this tank. Water goes through the bulkhead, through the tube, and back down the red pipe into the sump, and it just completes the circuit. One thing to note here is this black tube. This is flexible PVC, and I believe this is actually really important if you're going to be doing something like this. And the reason being, 10-gallon aquariums have pretty thin glass, so you have to be real careful with drilling them. And then once I connected my plumbing, if I just had a standard piece of PVC pipe, I could have used that. But if I ever banged into that, I'd be real afraid that it would just crack the glass, the torque created from, pushing that pipe, which would basically be a lever, would just basically have a chance of cracking the glass, I think. So that's why I went with this flexible PVC. That way, if I bump into it, it's not going to do anything to the tank over there. So yeah, and then the lighting. This is a Marineland light that I've got on there, and it's got its own timer. And this goes on, I think I run it for about 12 hours. It comes on about 8 o'clock at night, and turns off around 8 o'clock in the morning. And it seems to be working well for me. So the algae is growing. There's tons of life in there. And all in all, I think it was a good addition to the aquarium. One last thing I want to mention with this Refugium is the flow. So when I first set this up, it was in exactly this configuration. But I did notice one time when sticking my hand in there, harvesting some of the algae, the water, you could tell, was really, really cold. And this was like last winter or the beginning of this year, during the winter time when, the house was a lot cooler. I stuck my hand in there, and when it got down to the bottom, you could just feel that the water was a lot colder than it should have been. And that was because, the tank did get filled with algae, and the flow was coming in from the top. And there really wasn't a whole lot of circulation getting throughout the entire tank. So the water was coming in and basically making its way over here and not making its way through the tank. And, the water was getting cold down here. And I also noticed a lot of detritus building up down in the bottom there. So what I did to combat that, or to correct that, was to install a little power head in there, which I don't know if you could see that, but it's in there. It's right there. And I don't run that all of the time. So what I do is I have that hooked up to my Apex, and every 2 hours I will have that turn on for half an hour. And the reason being is because I do have a lot of, like I said before, the little copepods and stuff living in there. And I didn't want them to be subjected to a constant flow. I thought maybe if it was a lower flow area, that would be good for them. So every 2 hours, that pump will turn on for half an hour, mix things up. And it seems to be working pretty good for me. And that was the click right there. I think it just turned on. Yeah, it did. And you can see the flow, going through the tank. And, yeah, so that's been able to regulate the temperature by keeping the water circulated. Believe it or not, it's been, helping with the detritus, even though this is still jam-packed in there. It still has enough flow to get, things moving up into the water column, where they can make it up, perhaps over the overflow back into the tank, and then come back in through the other overflows and get filtered out. So, yeah, I think that's about all there is to say about my Refugium setup. So if you guys have any questions or comments, leave them below. I'll be happy to answer them if I can. And, yeah, hopefully you found this informative. And if you guys want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Always helps if you can hit the thumbs up. Give me one of those likes. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.